So the media market correction of 2022 has resulted in major Hollywood studios reducing their expenses and improving their margins in their direct-to-consumer operations, in their linear TV sectors, and in their films. All of that is just a fancy way of saying we can't afford to pay for all these flopping TV, film, and streaming projects. No kidding. In this video, we're going to explore the industry's response to this particular correction, including spending cuts by the leading companies such as Netflix and Disney. And we'll also talk about the growth in content expenses by companies such as Amazon and maybe a couple more. This should be fun. It should be a fun ride. Here we go. Now, before we get started, please double check that you are subscribed to the channel. It's pretty easy. Turn the red thing, if it's red, to gray. It'll say subscribed. Also, double check down there on the bell icon and make sure that that is turned on for all notifications. That way, it'll keep you from missing a video, a live stream, or even a short where we cover things that the mainstream media is no longer interested in covering, or at least they do it quite reservedly at best. Now, let's dive right into the video, and this is a pretty good conversation. You see, the great market reset, correction, whatever you want to call it, of 2022 has brought us to a new era of cost consciousness in Hollywood, which, well, hasn't been there for quite some time. Sweeping a lot of the bad content off of a lot of the services is just step one. Canceling film projects has seemed to be step two. And step three, it was a massive amount of layoffs that, well, unfortunately, are just beginning. And with the boom phase of the streaming wars, well behind us at this point, studios are now looking for ways to reduce their expenses and improve their margins for their direct-to-consumer operations. Well, and also for film and regular television, but we'll set that aside for now. See, they're cutting back on the quantity of shows and the quantity of films that they're making. They're focusing on quality. Well, who'd have thunk it? And as part of this contraction of material, because there's another form of contraction that's coming for them later, the reduction in commissioned content, well, it's starting to show up on the company's balance sheets. It's starting to show up on the company's balance sheets, well, and the bottom line as well, because obviously that seems to be the thing that Wall Street is paying attention to. So let's focus rather heavily on the streaming side of the equation, because that seems to be where the bulk of the change is coming from. You have one of the leading companies in this space is Netflix, obviously, and they actually reduced their expenses in 2022 by about 5%. They cut down to $17.7 billion in 2021, all the way down to $16.84 billion last year. That's pretty good. And that move actually marked a shift from the company's previous position as a pioneer in direct-to-consumer content spending charges. In other words, that's a fancy way of saying we make a lot of originals. And they need to, because they lost a lot of licensed content because all the studios wanted to have their own walled gardens, which, again, proved to be a poor business strategy, and they've adjusted that as well. Warner Brothers Discovery, specifically, has not reported their full year results yet, at least, you know, their numbers financially, and they are expected to trim even more from their bottom line going forward. According to Morgan Stanley, analysts over there have said that Warner Brothers Discovery spent about $18.3 billion on content in 2022. That's a 20% decrease for both of these entities overall, at least when you combine them in 2021. So this was essentially laid out verbatim as the plan right from the very start, coming straight out of Zaslav's lips from the very first time he hosted a town hall. So all you had to do is pay attention and know what their plan was, and they're executing on it. And it's working out well for them. Their stock has been on the rise. Now, While other spending at other major media companies and tech companies continued to grow, at least over the course of the last year, the signs of the impending austerity, there's a fancy word for you, were still, visible across the board. For some of these entities, there had to be a retreat from the high watermark that they had set. I mean, there was no alternative. Disney, for example, is probably the starkest contrast in what they were doing. They spent a record high of $29.9 billion on content during the fiscal year, but that was actually below the $33 billion height that they had forecasted at the start of the year. So it's hard to maintain those spending levels when there's no discernible return on your investment. And of course, they had a $1.5 billion loss in the previous quarter, which saw Bob Chapek find his way out the door, which, was good or bad, depending upon who you talk to. Now, the company overall, and I'm speaking specifically of Disney, has announced plans to trim $3 billion in annualized non-sports content costs. And that's a clear indication of the times, but I'm not convinced that their overall spend with sports added back into the equation, well, I don't think it's going to be any less. I think it's going to be more. You have to ask yourself this question: why are you removing sports? Well, it's because of rights deals. They're incredibly expensive. You want to know some more about some of the pending or upcoming rights deals? Check this video right here. Disney's about to get fleeced when it comes to sports. And one of the ways to hide that, the amount of money they're about to spend, is to spin ESPN off into its own, sector of the business, creating a third leg to the table so as not to have it collapse. I imagine that's also a way for them to hide any comparables, meaning you aren't going to be able to compare one thing to another year to year because it didn't exist in that particular structure before. Pretty dirty, Disney. They do that a lot, by the way. Tricky little lawyer mice. So let's move on. NBC Universal actually saw an increase in spending in 2022. They spent more money and they needed to, but it was only half as much as the growth between 2019 and 2021, if you look at it as a percentage. The CEO of NBC Universal, his name's Jeff Schnell, or Shell, I think, something like that. Anyway, he recently stated that 2023 will be the peak for spending on the company's streaming service, Peacock. However, expenses may actually have to be reduced more quickly than that because it's possible Wall Street could sour on the company's mounting direct-to-consumer spend. They've had a lot of losses, let's say it that way, which by all indications, they've already started to do it. Let's not forget that Peacock just removed their free tier and have moved in favor of their $5 tier with ads. So if you are a longtime free tier person, apparently you are grandfathered in, at least for now. But if you go to try to sign up for that free tier, it's not there anymore. It's $4.99 a month, and you still get ads. Amazon, on the other hand, has been protected from the turbulence in Hollywood due to its financial largesse. That's a fancy way of saying, because they have a lot of money. And of course, without mentioning the fact that 40% of their customer base actually ignores the video element entirely. Some people don't even know it exists, which is really rather funny. It's kind of like the ultimate loss leader when it comes to original content, and it's really not the primary focus for them, although they would like to convince you differently. You see, the tech giant's actual total video and music expense was up considerably in 2022. It was up 28%, in fact, to $16.6 billion. That's a big jump. It's up 3.6 billion from 2021. The increase was driven obviously by the Prime programming stuff that was added, like the Rings of Power and the NFL's Thursday Night Football. Amazon CFO Brian Ozlowski actually talked about this and added that the company spent about $7 billion on Amazon Originals, live sports, and licensed third-party video content, which of course is included with Prime, which again, 40% of people don't even pay attention to. Used to be different. Used to be 60% of people didn't pay attention to it. But they had some success in showing people that they actually did some stuff with, obviously, Rings of Power, football, and a couple of other things. What's not to be ignored here, of course, is the fact that a huge amount of that outlay was for the massive flop Rings of Power specifically. So, oopsie. Now, industry-wide belt tightening is expected to continue through this entire year. 2023, it's going to be rough. Ampri analysis is forecasting global content spend increase just about 2% year over year. And that's only coming from a few of these companies. That margin actually represents the lowest growth in over a decade. And if you exclude 2020, which was a COVID year, which they've done, it actually would have been fair to include it because there wasn't a lot of growth or loss in 2020 to begin with. So why they set it aside, I don't. Despite the overall reduction in content and content spending specifically, the total figure remains elevated compared to days before the streaming wars. Joe Biden's economy with rampant running inflation, well, it's affecting even the greatest of media entities. All of the powerhouses are getting less for their money. Yeah, just like you and I are. Hollywood now faces some challenges of cutting costs without hampering their theatrical return, their streaming growth, and their must-watch programming, which will remain an essential investment going forward in order to survive and differentiate themselves, to fend off the coming contraction and the acquisition wave that is certain to follow shortly. Believe it or not, that's probably coming in the next 2 years. As all of the major players right now attempt to actually find the right strategy to move forward through trial and error, which is a bad way of going about things, this year may be even more chaotic than last year. I mean, it probably will be. There seems to be at least 2 companies that have actually hit the right strategy or formula moving forward. But the stubborn ones are still clinging on to very desperately, in fact, preaching the message and agenda at all costs. One of those, obviously, is Disney. They may find themselves in greater trouble than they're already in. So regardless of any machinations that are taken at this point, the media market correction of 2022 has ushered in a new era, obviously, of the cost consciousness that we talked about at the beginning of the video. And of course, that's driven by only one thing, the ultimate boss, which is Wall Street investors. So, I guess, hang on to your hats, folks. It's going to get bumpy. But for now, be sure to take care of yourself. Take care of others. Wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.